that I came in 1989. So at this point, we're going to take a minute of silence for Mr. Hayward and to just acknowledge his passing. Later on, when we're at condolences, members can actually speak to it. The moment of silence will begin now. Thank you, members. Members, we'll now start the order today. The minutes from the 17th of June have been circulated. Are there any amendments required? No amendments. The minutes will be printed as confirmed. Messages from the governor. There are none. Announcements by the speaker. The announcement this morning is that we received notification from MP Tiro that he'll be absent today. He also announced that the Ombudsman's Bermuda annual report for 2021 has also been received by the House. Messages from the Senate. There are none. Papers and other communications. This morning we have 5 such, and the first is in the name of the Premier and Minister of Finance. Premier, would you like to present your paper at this time?
Good morning to you, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the consideration of the Honorable House of Assembly the Contributory Pensions Amendment of Benefits Order 2022, proposed to be made by the Minister of Finance and exercise the powers conferred by Section 37 of the Contributory Pensions Act.
Thank you. Would you like to, the next is in the name of the Madam AG. Madam AG, would you like to present yours?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly the Consumer Affairs Annual Report, January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2021, and the Legal Aid Annual Report, 2020 to 2022.
Thank you for doing both. Minister of Tourism. Minister of Tourism.
Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the consideration of the Honorable House of Assembly the Tourism Investment Cambridge Beaches Resort and Spa Order 2022, as made by the Minister responsible for tourism under Section 3 of the Tourism Investment Act 2017, together with the written agreement of the Minister of Finance in exercise of the power conferred by Section 5 of the Tourism Investment Act 2017.
Thank you, Minister.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The next communication this morning is from the Minister of Health. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Morning.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the consideration of the Honorable House of Assembly the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Extension Number 5, Order 2022, proposed to be made by the Minister of Health in exercise of the power conferred by Section 107A of the Public Health Act 1949.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, all ministers, for the papers and communications this morning. We'll now move on. The next section on the order paper would be petitions, and there are none. The next item is the statements by ministers and junior ministers and members and listening audience. We have 14 such statements this morning, and we're going to begin with the first by the Premier and Minister of Finance. Premier, would you like to present your statement this morning?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Premier, 1 second before you start. Members, just as of housekeeping, I announced earlier to you before we started, but for those who may not have been on at that time, there is a problem at the SharePoint right now where you normally find the documents. So we're making sure all the documents are going to be put up on the parliamentary website as they are released. As the statements are being put out, they will go on the site so you can view the statement. But if we can get the shipwright up and running during the day, we'll notify it it's up. But at the moment, they're working on trying to resolve the technical glitch. But the information will be accessible on the website. Premier, continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Loud and clear.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I rise, though I am seated in the cabinet chamber, as we are not yet back in the House, but I rise to provide an update on the government's financial performance for fiscal year 2021-2022, which highlights continued signs of a strengthened economy, despite the considerable challenges we continue to face as a country. As highlighted in previous statements, the revised estimate produced following the onset of COVID-19 anticipated a deficit of $245.5 million for fiscal year 2020-2021. However, once the actual results were tabulated, the deficit for the 2020-2021 year stood at $184.2 million, showing a $61.3 million improvement from original estimates. Mr. Speaker, the following... Mr. Speaker, someone's mic is not muted, sorry. Mr. Speaker, the following fiscal year, 2021-2022, original estimates presented in the budget statement anticipated a budget deficit of $125 million. When the 2022-2023 budget statement was presented, the updated forecast indicated that revenues had increased by approximately $31.5 million to $1.03 billion, with expenditures estimated to increase slightly for an updated deficit of $117 million. As additional information has now become available, estimates have been further adjusted to reflect a further $32 million increase in revenues and a corresponding $8 million increase in expenditure. Therefore, compared to the original 2021-22 estimates as presented in the budget, the updated 2021-2022 forecast anticipates an overall $30 million improvement in the deficit to $95 million, with the revenues estimated to be $63 million higher than initially forecast, and overall expenditures $32 million, of which $21 million were unanticipated COVID-related expenses. For the current fiscal year, notwithstanding anticipated losses in revenue from the aircraft registry due to the fallout from the Russia-Ukraine war, the government's updated revenue estimates relating primarily to better than anticipated cruise and hotel occupancy levels project that the government will still be able to meet our deficit targets. This updated forecast is encouraging given the war's severe impact on global economies. Mr. Speaker, as the information provided above highlights, we are in a better financial position than anticipated in February, when Bermuda's national budget was presented. The increases in revenue in key areas such as stamp duty, corporate services tax, and vehicle license fees, as well as immigration receipts, have been significant. In addition, the government received approximately $5.5 million from the Bermuda Monetary Authority, part of their operating surplus, which I'd shared with honorable members earlier in this session, that had not been included in our revised budget estimates. Expenditures remain broadly in line with the revised February estimates, although up from our initial estimates in areas such as COVID expenditure, urgent capital expenditures, including additional funds for urgent repairs at Tynes Bay, and $20 million additional dollars due to Skyport for the minimum revenue guarantee that this government inherited from the former administration. Mr. Speaker, the prudent fiscal management policy this government has committed to and followed since its election in 2017 continues to be a positive factor for this economy. We committed to reduce the budget deficit and moving towards a balanced budget. Our 2019 projections saw us with a deficit of only $7.4 million. However, the failed Morgan's Point project inherited by the former administration and the unexpected onset of the global COVID-19 pandemic required us to take significant measures. These measures not only protected the health and well-being of our residents, but also provided relief and financial support to Bermudians as evidenced by the unemployment benefit payments of up to $500 per week to cover 10,000 residents severely impacted from the fallout from this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, despite the challenging period, we also took steps to mitigate somewhat the financial and economic impact of this awful scourge which affected so many people around the globe. Thus, as noted above, with a projected deficit of $245.5 million, our ultimate position at the end of March was $184.2 million. Throughout the 2021-2022 fiscal year, the government continued to prudently manage expenses while taking specific actions to build the revenue base for both the short and the long term through the delivery of Bermuda's economic recovery plan. The impact of those actions can be seen as our updated estimates anticipate a lower deficit than expected just 4 months ago. The development of the economic recovery plan was a recognition that in light of the challenges caused by COVID, we needed to take specific action to ensure financial stability and growth. The Honorable Minister of Economy and Labor will update this Honorable House on the government's continued implementation initiatives contained in Bermuda's economic recovery plan shortly. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda has enjoyed significant benefits over the years from the work that has built a world-class insurance industry based in Bermuda. The contributions made by the sector to our economy are well documented. In fact, during the pandemic, the resilience of this sector helped support the economy and offset the significant damage done to the tourism and hospitality sectors. Initially, Bermuda's focus was on the captive insurance market, and then we expanded to develop a significant property and casualty market. More recently, we've seen considerable growth in specialty insurers and the long-term insurance market, which has been beneficial to Bermuda. However, as part of our economic strategy to grow our economy in a prudent and considered way, we have already started expanding into other sectors to diversify our revenue base. Bermuda recognized the opportunities that could exist in the digital asset space. We built an infrastructure that will attract digital asset businesses that wish to be based in a jurisdiction with robust regulatory regime and encourage innovation. That sector has already seen significant growth, as Bermuda now has 15 licensed digital asset businesses with more companies in the pipeline. Additionally, there are currently 7 licensed innovative insurers in Bermuda who are leading the charge as we witness the beginning of convergence between traditional insurance and digital finance. As we continue to expand our international business sector and see continued growth in existing and new industries, we're experiencing positive results in our economy. For example, jobs have grown in the international business sector by 10% over the last 2 years, increasing from 4,020 jobs to 4,411 jobs, with a majority of the additional positions being filled by Bermudians. Mr. Speaker, last Friday I visited 2 new companies in Bermuda who, in the previous years, have employed 19 Bermudians with plans to expand their office staff further. These new jobs are concrete proof that our economic diversification strategy is delivering positive results for Bermudians. The results of successful execution of the strategy are reflected in better than expected revenue numbers that I share with honorable members today. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda's strong performance and the decisive and prudent actions taken by the government to manage a once-in-a-century pandemic have been evaluated by independent ratings agencies. These agencies have maintained Bermuda's strong ratings at pre-COVID levels and have assessed Bermuda's outlook to be stable. These confirmed ratings are certainly a positive for our island and are an external validation of this government's solid and effective management of the economy. It also augurs well for the future. Mr. Speaker, the strength of international business and its significant contribution to our economy must translate to relief for those Bermudians that are not in international business. Bermudians in all walks of life, whether employed by international business or otherwise, have contributed to the positive environment in Bermuda, allowing international companies to build successful businesses here. Therefore, we want to ensure that the benefits are shared in a way that will positively impact the lives of our residents while continuing to ensure that Bermuda remains an excellent place to do quality business. Mr. Speaker, in the budget statement released in February 2022, it was promised that half of any amount better than budget targets would be directed towards relief to ease burdens related to Bermuda's high cost of living. This government will be true to that pledge we made in February by bringing a package at the next sitting of the House that will deliver on our promise of more relief to come. Mr. Speaker, in this fiscal year, this government has already provided relief by further reducing the payroll tax paid for persons making less than $96,000 a year. We have reduced vehicle licensing fees and ensured charities can receive land tax relief. Supplemental unemployment benefits have been extended for persons significantly disadvantaged by COVID, and land tax relief has been given to registered care homes. Hotels and restaurants whose income was reduced considerably by COVID restrictions have had their payroll tax concessions extended to help rebuild the critical tourism and hospitality sector. We have also extended new hire relief to encourage the expansion of local and international business. Mr. Speaker, since this budget was delivered, this government ensured that fuel prices at the pump have been maintained at February 2022 levels, despite the significant increase in global prices, primarily due to the Russia-Ukraine war. This price freeze of gasoline saves $23 on the average size car tank every time it is filled up. Mr. Speaker, I want to repeat that. This price freeze of gasoline saves the average family in this country $23 per fill-up of their vehicle. If it were not for the actions of this government, prices at the pump would be 25% higher today than they were in February. This action is helping families, taxi operators, tour operators, and local businesses. The additional relief to be announced on July 15th will support working families by putting more money back in their pockets, support households in reducing electricity bills, and will also reduce the cost of essential food items. Mr. Speaker, as I noted in a previous statement given to this Honorable House, there are limits to the support that the government can provide, as it is vital for Bermuda's economic future that the government meet its budget targets. With global inflation set to continue for the foreseeable future, and a growing number of economists predicting a recession in the world's largest economy and our largest trading partner, the United States, all residents must be wise with their spending choices. These are uncertain economic times, especially as we cope with rebuilding our economy following the coronavirus pandemic. This government will remain fiscally prudent, while also delivering the relief many Bermudians need. Mr. Speaker, it is up to all of us in this Honorable House and on this island we call home to work together to ensure that Bermuda's economy works for all. The continued delivery of Bermuda's economic recovery plan has been beneficial to Bermuda, and this government will work to ensure that we do everything we can to minimize the impact of global events on our economy while providing relief to workers to ensure this economy works for all Bermudians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Mayor, the next statement is also in your name. Would you like to do the second statement now?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased today to table the bill entitled the Banks and Deposits Companies Amendment Act 2022. The primary purpose of the Amendment Act is to provide the Bermuda Monetary Authority with an express power to issue codes of conduct in relation to manner in which an institution conducts deposit-taking business. In addition, the amendments will allow for the regulation of banking fees, similar to provisions that exist in other major countries. This is also seen as an important provision to enhance consumer protection in this area. Mr. Speaker, far too many Bermudians can, unfortunately, tell stories from their own experience or from close friends and family that have felt the wrath of local banks increasing fees at a moment's notice, leaving Bermudians to simply accept it. Such decisions by local financial institutions have contributed to the cost of living in this country. And while banks continue to improve their bottom lines, it is not lost on this government that much of which comes at the expense of the people of Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, this government's position on this matter has been consistent, as evidenced in the 2013 Progressive Labor Party budget reply, where I then stated, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, certain fees at local banks punish and compound distress for those in financial difficulty. One key issue is credit card over-limit fees, which is difficult for the average consumer to grasp, given that credit cards have limits. However, Bermuda banks allow customers to exceed their limit and then charge a fee every time they do, with fees sometimes far exceeding the transactions that triggered the fees. This punitive practice has been addressed in many jurisdictions, with regulations restricting a bank to one over-the-limit charge per billing cycle. We call on the Minister of Finance to direct the BMA to put an immediate end to this practice in our local banks. End quote. Mr. Speaker, since the former government was unwilling to put measures in place to protect the people of Bermuda from unjust banking practices that have long since been outlawed in other jurisdictions, this government will keep its promise, as laid out in its election platform, and take the action that voters demand. Mr. Speaker, though some local banks have adopted to global norms of limiting over-limit fees to one charge per billing cycle, there are still some local banks that have not. Additionally, some banking fees at local banks have increased by 400% over the last 3 years alone, which drains purchasing power of everyday Bermudians as more of their hard-earned money goes to banking fees. Mr. Speaker, I understand that banks globally have resorted to fee income to supplement declining interest income while global interest rates were at historically low levels. But as interest rates increase, it is imperative for the government to act to protect consumers. Mr. Speaker, last week I relayed the position of the government to the Bermuda Bankers Association, and it is my hope that they will collectively address the escalating fees and also address the charges that are outside of global norms. However, Mr. Speaker, as I told them last week, and I will tell this honorable House and the people of Bermuda today, if they will not act, then this government will act in the interests of consumers in Bermuda by introducing limits on banking fees to ensure fair access to banking services. Bermuda's residents deserve no less than fair access to banking services, and they should not be disadvantaged by punitive fees when compared to residents in other jurisdictions. Mr. Speaker, this legislation will allow the authority to ensure banking institutions are appropriately complying with customer protection requirements and promoting better and fairer treatment of their customers. Conduct matters in relation to financial institutions have been the subject of numerous discussions throughout the community. The changes proposed in this bill are seen as a positive enhancement to the powers available to the authority and the minister to ensure that matters related to the protection of customers are given appropriate considerations by entities in this sector. Mr. Speaker, following discussions with the ministry and extensive consultation with relevant stakeholders, including the general public, the new regime is intended to build upon existing conduct requirements and will be based on the standards set down by the Bank of International Settlements, the OECD, and the G20 high-level principles on financial consumer protection. Mr. Speaker, having conducted a jurisdiction review and noted that some jurisdictions have the same regulators having responsibility for prudential and conduct supervision, while others have allocated the responsibility for prudential regulation to a different agency from the one responsible for the protection of consumers and financial markets. Given the scale of Bermuda's financial services market, it is feasible for the authority to assume the conduct of business mandate alongside its prudential responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, this legislation will allow the authority to have a focus on ensuring the institutions are appropriately complying with consumer protection requirements. To complement the authority's work in this area, the customer-facing component will be addressed through a fit-for-purpose regime, which will come under the Consumer Affairs Department. Mr. Speaker, the bill entitled the Bermuda Monetary Authority Amendment Act 2022 will be debated in this Honorable House later today. The purpose of that bill is to provide the authority with an additional principal object relating to the authority having oversight of the conduct of business by financial institutions for the purpose of promoting the protection of consumers using products and services provided by financial institutions. This is an important change to the authority's mandate, which recognizes that consumer protection is now a core function of the authority and will reinforce the changes to be made by this bill. Mr. Speaker, addressing these matters will be beneficial to the economy as a whole. Residents expect to have fair access to banking services, and I therefore look forward to providing more details on this bill as we go through the legislative process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Premier. Premier, the third statement is also in here.
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for setting that at this time as well.
No problem, Mr. Speaker. The government has been busy on delivering on its election promises. I will go with my third statement, Mr. Speaker.
Go right ahead.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, in this government's 2017 election platform, this government pledged to put our seniors first with initiatives such as annual cost of living increases for social insurance pensions at the rates of inflation. And I'm pleased to announce today that it is a commitment that this government will continue to uphold. Mr. Speaker, this government remains focused on improving the quality of life for our seniors and lessening the hardships that they endure. Therefore, in accordance with Section 37 of the Contributory Pensions Act 1970, earlier today I tabled the Contributory Pensions Amendment of Benefits Order 2022. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of the order is to increase pensions and other benefits under the Contributory Pensions Act by 2.75%. This increase will be backdated to August 16, 2021, as changes to benefits and contributions are typically made during that month. It is expected that this retroactive payback will cost the fund approximately $4.4 million in the short term. However, as per the government actuary, in the long term, the 2.75% increase in benefits will represent a small negative impact to the overall status of the fund. Mr. Speaker, the proposed 2.75% increase will raise the basic contributory pension from $1,077.14 to $1,106.75 per month, and will also raise the maximum contributory pension from $1,564 to $1,607 per month. As the increase will be backdated, the 10,000 residents receiving social insurance benefits will also receive a lump sum payment of up to $473 this year. This increase will mean that seniors will receive between, on an ongoing basis, an extra $355 to $516 each year. Mr. Speaker, the overall CPI rate increased by 0.5% during the period of August 2019 to July 2020, and from 0.4% from August 20 to July 2021. Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that there was not a pension increase that was put to the House for the 2020 year, so we did not do one last year, and that is the reason why these two matters are being combined. However, it was noted that the food component for the relevant periods increased 2.8% and 2.3% respectively. Given the importance of proper diets to the health and overall well-being of our seniors, it was determined by the Ministry of Finance that an increase above the prevailing CPI rate would be appropriate in the circumstances. This 2.75% increase, therefore, fully covers the overall rate of inflation, but also allows for some recognition of the specific impact on seniors on limited incomes due to the increase in food prices, and also, Mr. Speaker, the delay in the government implementing pension increases, as we must wait for the CPI figures to come out, and then we implement increases afterwards. Mr. Speaker, the 2020 actual report for the Contributory Pension Fund was tabled in this Honorable House on February 4, 2022. The 2021 increase in benefits would normally be accompanied by a corresponding increase in contributions. However, honorable members of the public will have recall that in the 2018 throne speech, the government announced that Bermuda's social insurance system will be changed from a fixed rate contribution to one based on a percentage of income. Mr. Speaker, as stated previously, when the 2020 actual report was tabled in February of this year, over the course of several months, important work has been done on assessing the current state of the contributory pension fund and to consider how to address funding gaps. The work consisted in developing a common set of facts around the fund status, developing a preliminary set of recommendations, and engaging key stakeholders in our unions and our business community. Mr. Speaker, this government was not elected to maintain the status quo. As such, the historic and unfair system that sees a CEO making $400,000 a year pay the same amounts in contributions as a worker making $40,000 a year cannot and will not continue. Social insurance contributions based on a percentage of income is not a unique concept to Bermuda, as it has been implemented in many other countries around the world, including the United Kingdom 45 years ago. This change will increase the take-home pay of low-income workers while ensuring that our pension fund is sustainable for future generations. It is the right and proper thing to do. Mr. Speaker, in closing, this government is proud of its record of delivering for our seniors. We kept our promise to increase prescription drug benefits under Future Care. We kept our promise to build more affordable housing for our seniors. We kept our promise to expand the seniors' care benefit under Future Care. We kept our promise to introduce a charter of rights and responsibilities for our seniors. And today, Mr. Speaker, we are keeping our promise to increase social insurance to support the seniors of this island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. The next statement this morning is in the name of the AG. Madam AG, would you like to present your statement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning again. Mr.
Morning.
Speaker, I'm pleased to give an overview of the work of the Department of Consumer Affairs as detailed in the Consumer Affairs Annual Report 2019 to 2021. Consumer Affairs, Mr. Speaker, is the designated government department assigned with the responsibility and authority to supervise, monitor, and regulate businesses providing consumer affairs and consumer services in or from within Bermuda in accordance with the Consumer Protection Act 1999, industry-specific legislation, and any ministerial regulations or directions. Consumer Affairs is mandated to protect consumers from unfair business practices, unconscionable consumer representations, and unsafe consumer goods pursuant to formal delegation. Consumer Affairs legal authority includes the responsibility to supervise, monitor, and regulate landlord and tenant residential matters in accordance with the Rent Increases Domestic Premises Control Act 1998, sectoral legislation, and any ministerial regulations or directions. Following the enactment of the Debt Collection Act 2018 in October 2020, sectoral legislation and ministerial regulations, Consumer Affairs has also been appointed with the authority to supervise, monitor, and regulate the commercial activities of registered debt collection agencies operating in Bermuda. In accordance with Section 10 of the Consumer Protection Act 1999, the Consumer Affairs Board has provided the Minister an annual report covering the regulatory and supervisory activities of Consumer Affairs for the 2019-2021 calendar years. During the period of time covered in the annual report, Mr. Speaker, Consumer Affairs fell under the remit of the Ministry of Home Affairs. As of April 2022, Consumer Affairs was formally relocated under the Ministry of Legal Affairs and Constitutional Reform and is now being presented to the House by the Minister of Legal Affairs and Constitutional Reform. Mr. Speaker, the annual report presented today for information of members covers the many consumer issues that arose over the course of the COVID-19 global pandemic and highlights the regulatory and supervisory activities undertaken by the board and the Consumer Affairs staff in response. It has been noted that Consumer Affairs has worked diligently in response to the COVID-19 global pandemic and continue to address consumer issues in an efficient and effective manner. The accomplishments of Consumer Affairs from 2019 to 2021, as outlined in the annual report, include, but are not limited to, e-commerce and bridging the digital divide. One second, Mr. Speaker, I do apologize.
No
The
problem.
enactment-
Yep.
Sorry, I had a page mix up here. Okay, I'm gonna paddle back for a second, Mr. Speaker, I do apologize. With the enactment of social distancing mandates, Mr. Speaker, commercial entities that historically operated absent a pre-existing online presence resulted in consumers being unable to contact customer service representatives and or effectively purchase their consumer goods and services. In support, Consumer Affairs acted as a conduit to support effective communication between commercial enterprises and consumers. Consumer Affairs communicated the necessity for commercial enterprises to have the technical capability to facilitate the availability of a customer service representative that is working from home. With regard to hospitality, Mr. Speaker, consumers who made travel and entertainment arrangements prior to and during the COVID-19 global pandemic were often left bearing the financial impact of the short notice cancellations as commercial entities began to heavily rely upon contractual force majeure clauses in order to avoid having to provide consumers with reimbursement. Consumer Affairs advises affected consumers to review their respective contractual terms and conditions in order to ascertain their rights with respect to cancellations when force majeure clauses may be relied upon. They were further advised to contact their service provider to confirm whether the event would be rescheduled or they would receive reimbursement for advance payments made. Given the lasting impact COVID-19 has had on travel and hospitality, Mr. Speaker, Consumer Affairs emphasized in communications with consumers the value in procuring appropriate consumer protection insurance where available in order to mitigate any potential risk of unfair over-reliance or force majeure clauses. Mr. Speaker, with regard to educational service providers, Consumer Affairs observed that a number of child daycare and nursery service providers elected to temporarily cease operations until health and safety concerns were adequately addressed by the government of Bermuda. Consequently, Consumer Affairs received a number of consumer complaints as a result of daycare and nursery schools being unwilling to provide reimbursements for child placement deposits. Consumer Affairs advised affected consumers that one, their child placement deposits were not reimbursable as they were intended to secure a position for the consumer's child, and two, the child would be entitled to a placement with their daycare or nursery once the operations resumed, and finally, that refusal to recognize the child's placement or provide a full refund for the child placement deposit would amount to an unfair trade practice. With regard to shipping and freight, Mr. Speaker, in conjunction with the increased uptake of online shopping following the onset of COVID-19, Consumer Affairs observed that many consumers increased their reliance on one, overseas suppliers of consumer goods, and two, Bermuda-based couriers. Consumer Affairs experienced an increase in the number of consumer complaints received with regard to one, undue delays in shipping, two, the shipping of incorrect consumer goods, and three, delays returning in returning items, and finally, difficulties experienced when attempting to contact Bermuda couriers. In order to address the issues faced by consumers, Mr. Speaker, Consumer Affairs acted as an intermediary by contacting Bermuda couriers, where it was discovered that many Bermuda couriers experienced operational issues due to being either understaffed and or ill-equipped to handle consumer inquiries due to the work-from-home mandates. Mr. Speaker, with regard to consumer scams and data security, the economic fallout from COVID-19 resulted in countless consumers facing financial uncertainty, which directly contributed towards a heightened need for loans, aid, and supplemental income. Consequently, Consumer Affairs observed the onset of online scams being specifically tailored to take advantage of financially vulnerable consumers. In response, Mr. Speaker, Consumer Affairs worked in collaboration with the Bermuda Police Services Financial Crime Unit. Consumer Affairs found the reversal of financial transactions directly attributable to a consumer scam to be difficult due to one, the financial service provider being unable to trace the recipient of the transferred funds, and two, the affected consumer being responsible for making informed financial decisions. Mr. Speaker, recognizing the necessity to ensure consumers are equipped with the tools necessary to effectively identify consumer scams and avoid undue harm, Consumer Affairs has employed a business and community liaison officer in order to improve upon Consumer Affairs' public educational activities. With regard to landlord and tenant, particularly vacation rental certificate uptake, Mr. Speaker, although the number of tourists visiting Bermuda has fallen following the COVID-19 global pandemic, Consumer Affairs has observed a continuous uptake of residential landlords seeking to have their residential units certified as vacation rental units. Mr. Speaker, following discussions with various landlords, Consumer Affairs is of the understanding that the increase in landlords seeking vacation rental certification is a direct result of landlords seeking greater control over their property. Many landlords have communicated a lack of confidence in their ability to obtain adequate legal recourse when faced with a tenant acting in contravention of their signed tenancy agreement. Mr. Speaker, Consumer Affairs intends to closely monitor and regulate the issuance of vacation rental certificates to ensure that the residents of Bermuda continue to have access to affordable housing and that the vacational rental market does not undermine the commercial efforts of Bermuda's hotel industry. With regard to landlord and tenant, again, illegal subletting and overcrowding, Mr. Speaker, during COVID-19, it was observed that a number of residential tenants, in an attempt to pool together limited financial resources, entered into unauthorized subletting arrangements, which resulted in the illegal overcrowding of residential accommodations. Mr. Speaker, landlords found themselves left uninformed of such arrangements and unable to pursue legal proceedings against subtenants that either failed to pay rent to the primary tenant and or cause damage to the property. Mr. Speaker, Consumer Affairs advised landlords to review the terms and conditions of their tenancy agreement template and consider inclusion of a contractual term that one, restricts the tenants from subletting the residential unit without the prior consent of the landlord, and two, places obligations on the primary tenant and the subtenant. With regard to hospitality work permit holders in that context, Mr. Speaker, Consumer Affairs observed that COVID-19 negatively impacted work permit holders who maintain tenancy agreements with their landlord while they return home during the tourism off-season in order to secure the home upon their return to Bermuda. As work permit holders attempted to return to Bermuda, Mr. Speaker, they were often subjected to significant delays in their travel arrangements or were informed by their employer that they had been made redundant. Mr. Speaker, in these circumstances, landlords were one, forced to incur unrecoverable costs in order to remove their tenants' assets, two, were subjected to unrecoverable outstanding rent, and three, faced with undue delays in obtaining legal authorization in order to legally dispose of their tenants' assets and procure a new tenant. In support, Consumer Affairs provided landlords with guidance on how to navigate Bermuda's landlord and tenant legal framework, and in certain circumstances, communicate with the courts on behalf of vulnerable landlords. With regard to COVID-19 relief and amendments to tenancy agreements, Mr. Speaker, appreciating the financial uncertainty faced by many tenants during COVID-19, Consumer Affairs assisted with the negotiation of temporary amendments to existing tenancy agreements, which would allow tenants to either one, make partial payments towards their monthly rent for a specified period of time, or two, temporarily withhold rent for a specified period of time. With regard to debt collection, and in particular licensing, Mr. Speaker, as part of the enactment of the Debt Collection Act 2019, Consumer Affairs provided administrative oversight of the licensing application process and provided applicants with administrative support to ensure an effective and efficient license application process. With regard to public communications, in particular financial relief from COVID-19, Mr. Speaker, with the onset of work from home mandates, many employees face difficulties contacting their employers in order to obtain the employer's signatures needed to file a valid COVID-19 financial relief request. Consumer Affairs helped employees correspond with their employers to ensure that they would be able to obtain their employer's signature. The Consumer Affairs worked in collaboration with the Ministry of Workforce Development to ensure that the effective administration of COVID-19 financial relief, and worked with debt collection agencies to persuade them to exhibit leniency when pursuing debtors. With regard to public communications, Mr. Speaker, during COVID-19, Consumer Affairs observed that many consumers did not have readily available access to the internet, i.e. residential internet and smartphones with mobile data plans, and or lacked the technical capabilities needed to navigate the Bermuda government's official COVID-19 website. Consumer Affairs assisted consumers with 1, the scheduling of vaccine appointments, 2, registration with the government of Bermuda SafeKey, and 3, the circulation of face masks and hand sanitizers to the homeless. Mr. Speaker, based on conversations held with new entrepreneurs, Consumer Affairs identified that many required guidance on how to manage a successful commercial enterprise. Therefore, to ensure that these entrepreneurs were adequately equipped and educated on how to effectively and efficiently manage a business, Mr. Speaker, Consumer Affairs provided entrepreneurs with guidance on how to 1, draft a standard consumer service contract, 2, draft a standard itemized bill of sale, and 3, pursue debt collection proceedings in the magistrate's court. With regard to electronic communications, Mr. Speaker, with the adoption of online education, Consumer Affairs received a number of consumer complaints against electronic communication service providers on the basis that they were providing unreliable residential tenant services, internet, I should say, services, and that customer service representatives were unresponsive. Mr. Speaker, the observed harm was particularly evident in residential units falling under the remit of the Rent Increases Domestic Premises Act 1978. Many tenants of rent-controlled properties either 1, did not have existing residential broadband internet access, as the residential unit did not have the necessary infrastructure in place, or 2, were not actively utilizing residential internet services prior to COVID-19. In support, Mr. Speaker, Consumer Affairs worked in conjunction with the Regulatory Authority of Bermuda to ensure that affected consumers were afforded timely and effective regulatory support. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to have today laid for the information of this Honorable House the annual report of Consumer Affairs Department.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam AG. The next statement is also in your name. Would you like to present that at this time?
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to update this Honorable House on the work of the Legal Aid Office. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister responsible, I earlier submitted for the information of this Honorable House a copy of the Legal Aid Committee's annual report for the combined fiscal periods 2020 to 2022 in accordance with Section 18(2) of the Legal Aid Act 1980. This annual report brings statutory annual report requirements for the Legal Aid Committee up to date. Mr. Speaker, by way of historical context, members will know that Bermuda's legal aid regime came into operation on 1st of November 1980 pursuant to the Act. We are now into the 42nd year of the Legal Aid Office delivering quality legal aid services for Bermudians who may not otherwise be able to access quality legal advice and representation. This service stands ready for individuals who meet the statutory financial means test and request legal aid assistance for the range of legal services available under the regime. In doing so, it ensures fair access to justice, one of the hallmarks of a well-developed rule of law. Mr. Speaker, I expect that members will unanimously agree that without access to legal representation where warranted, access to justice is often denied. Hence, the government ensures this provision of service continues through challenging financial times, noting the exceptionally high cost of private sector legal services, which remain cost prohibitive for many of our citizens. The legal aid scheme promotes equitable access to justice to Bermudians at the lowest end of our socioeconomic strata. The legal aid scheme, therefore, is an essential pillar of our legal and justice systems and ensures that qualifying persons are granted legal assistance as a right. Mr. Speaker, the annual report underscores the priority placed on representation for those charged with serious criminal offenses or offenses which may carry a sentence of 5 years or more of imprisonment. Under the heading Operational Statistics for the period 2020 to 2022, the report points out the broad scope of assistance delivered in the reporting period. Accordingly, it also details that the committee grants certificates to applicants who qualify as of right for criminal trials and appeals in the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, and exceptionally before the Privy Council in England. In the exercise of its discretion, the Legal Aid Committee also considers and assigns legal aid certificates to applicants charged with criminal offenses of a less serious nature for appearances and trials in the magistrate's court where it is deemed to be in the interest of justice to do so. The provision of representation in the magistrate's court also includes offering representation for participants of the specialist courts such as the mental health court, drug treatment court, and DUI court. Mr. Speaker, Section 4 of the Act empowers the Legal Aid Committee to administer the internal administration of the scheme by reviewing legal aid applications, awarding legal aid certificates to eligible persons, and deciding the assignment of legal aid counsel, and managing the duty counsel roster of lawyers, giving real-time free legal advice to unrepresented defendants appearing in the lower courts. Mr. Speaker, the committee also has the responsibility to prepare and maintain a list of barristers and attorneys who are in active private practice in Bermuda to draw the names of counsels who are able and willing to represent applicants and assisted persons. This function ensures quality representation. The committee is comprised, Mr. Speaker, of 5 members in accordance with the first schedule of the Act, which also regulates the board's composition and procedures. Decisions of the committee, Mr. Speaker, are legislatively mandated. The fairness of the process is being steered by the requirement of a quorum majority vote. Mr. Speaker, the Senior Legal Aid Counsel has the responsibility for the day-to-day management, administration, and operations of the Legal Aid Office. During the reporting period, Ms. Susan Moore Williams has returned to her substantive post as Senior Legal Aid Counsel after completing a period of reassignment in another ministry. The annual report further outlines the staffing complement at the Legal Aid Office. Presently, there are 3 administrative posts and 5 legal posts. Administrative posts are that of the office manager, accounts officer, and an administrative assistant. The 5 legal posts are as follows: the Senior Legal Aid Counsel, 2 Legal Aid Counsel, 1 Junior Legal Aid Counsel, and 1 Paralegal. The Legal Aid Counsel attend court and represent clients at a reduced and manageable cost to the public purse, as they are salaried employees. The Junior Legal Aid Counsel post is vacant and currently under active recruitment, and a contract has been offered to a qualified and suited Bermudian for the remaining legal counsel post, which has also been under recruitment. The in-house legal aid counsel model, which was implemented in 2018, made provision for increasing the internal resources to reduce overall costs to the scheme, originating from overutilization of private practice attorneys. It is noted that appreciable savings are expected to be sustained. Furthermore, during the period covered, recruitment efforts proceeded for the posts of legal aid counsel, junior legal aid counsel, accounts officer, and administrative assistant. Interim provisions were utilized to ensure service delivery coverage, notwithstanding the vacancies, by way of temporary relief hires, reassignments from within the public service, and temporary consultancies. The report confirms at page 12 that recruitment for the vacant legal aid counsel post is well underway and expected to be completed next month. Mr. Speaker, members may recall that a new framework for the assignment of counsel under the Legal Aid Act 1980 was officially implemented on 1st March 2019, having been developed the preceding year. The changes were devised alongside a host of cost-saving reform measures across government. In this instance, it was determined that what seemed counterintuitive, to increase staff from 5 to 8, would actually reduce the operational cost of the scheme overall. The justification for implementing an in-house staff counsel model was in recognition that operational efficiencies and savings, institutional knowledge building, and providing opportunities for a cadre of specialized Bermudian defense lawyers would offer better delivery of services within public spending limits. The new model ensures that diversified legal services can now be delivered by in-house staff counsel in lieu of overutilizing outside counsel. The in-house counsel capacity continues to grow, Mr. Speaker, and although there is a hybrid of in-house and private attorney case assignments, measurable savings have been achieved to date. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 notwithstanding, cost savings year over year are evidenced on page 15 of the report. It shows the amounts paid to external counsel for representing legal aid clients. In the year ending 2018, before the cost saving scheme was implemented, that figure was more than $1.9 million. By the end of the last fiscal year, which is March 31st, 2022, that cost was reduced by more than 65%, down to under $700,000 at $663,360. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the report anticipates that costs will continue to trend downward in tandem with full implementation of the reform model. Data for this current reporting period reflected the following. In 2021, there were a total of 118 applications considered, of which 133 were approved and 55 were denied. Of these applications, 133 were criminal matters, 46 were civil matters, and 29 were matrimonial and domestic matters. By comparison, Mr. Speaker, in 2021-22, there were a total of 225 applications considered, of which 121 were approved and 104 denied. 130 of the applications were for criminal matters, 53 were civil matters, and 50 were matrimonial and domestic matters. Mr. Speaker, one of the indispensable benefits of the scheme as part of the Ministry of Legal Affairs and Constitutional Reform is the ability for advancing real-time reforms to laws that impact on the operation of our justice system. In doing so, issues of wider public interest, which come to light by legal aid counsel, can be highlighted for legislative reform priority. A recent example being reform to Section 519 of the Criminal Code 1907, which now place the defense and prosecution on equal footing as it relates to the number of challenges each side can make to potential jurors. The unconstitutionality of Section 519 of the Criminal Code was uncovered from advocacy originating from the Legal Aid Office and ultimately led to the passing of the Criminal Code Amendment Act No. 2, 2020. Mr. Speaker, upholding the cause of justice is not only predicated upon advocacy in criminal matters. The report details that legal aid certificates were also granted for varying civil, matrimony, and domestic proceedings over the period, especially in instances where there were vulnerable parties, such as landlord and tenant matters in the magistrate's court and family court proceedings involving care orders, supervision orders, custody, maintenance, and access. Similarly, for matters in the higher courts, legal aid certificates were granted for matters in the Supreme Court involving claims for damages arising out of negligence, divorce, and ancillary relief applications, and all such appeals to the Court of Appeal. Mr. Speaker, it is reported that timeliness and accuracy remains a priority at the Legal Aid Office with respect to its deliverables to the public. As reflected in its reported output measures, the office maintains the ability to process applications for legal aid certificates within 14 working days. However, it must be emphasized that achieving this objective is almost entirely dependent upon whether applicants do their part to submit the required information in a timely manner. Process applications for temporary certificates, commonly known as emergency certificates, within 3 working days. This too is subject to applicants submitting all supporting financial information at the time of application. In addition, applications for temporary certificates are approved by the Senior Legal Aid Counsel once all supporting financial information is received. And finally, temporary certificates are ratified and extended to a full legal aid certificate or are discharged by the Legal Aid Committee within 28 days. Mr. Speaker, another major deliverable is the processing of external attorney fees. It is reported that the acquisition of a dedicated accounts administrator during the period under review has led to improvements in the processing of payments. Accordingly, the committee and the Legal Aid Office together are generally able to maintain the 30 working day commitment to taxation and processing of external attorney fees. Mr. Speaker, the chairman concluded the report by reminding us that all committee members are volunteers who give up their time and experience at the weekly meetings to carry out the very demanding mandate as prescribed in the Act. She extends her personal appreciation for committee members' hard work and dedication and applauds their commitment to quality service delivery during the period covered. Mr. Speaker, I once again conclude by amplifying the Chairman's expressions of gratitude to the Legal Aid Committee members for their selfless duty, the selfless duty they uniquely give for the preservation of access to justice in Bermuda. On behalf of the government and people of Bermuda, I commend the committee chairman, Michelle and Matt, for her steady stewardship during ongoing implementation of reforms to the model. It is further acknowledged that the unprecedented disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic took place during this reporting period. The committee members and staff alike are commended for the equally extraordinary adaptability and professionalism they have demonstrated during such trying times. Sincere thanks are also extended to all public officers, staff, duty counsel, consultants, law pupils, and others who have served to support the work of the Legal Aid Office. Each are deserving of recognition for their steadfastness in sustaining the delivery of legal aid services during a challenging past 2 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam AG. Minister Works, you have the next statement on the order this morning. Would you like to present it at this time?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, today I'd like to bring to
Minister, can we get you just to increase your volume? Your audio is a bit low here. Maybe get a little closer to your mic or just...
Okay.
Okay.
That better?
Much better. Continue.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, today I'd like to bring to the attention of this Honorable House the successful training of 35 Bermudians within the horticultural industry through the partnership between the Exceptional Skills Development Program, SDP, run by Mr. Roger Paris and his team, the Department of Parks, and the Kingston Marwood College. Mr. Speaker, since 2015, the SDP has provided a safe environment to host hands-on training opportunities for young men and women interested in the horticulture industry by empowering participants with life skills and enhance their opportunities to qualify for employment. To date, this initiative has successfully trained over 150 participants. In 2019, the board of the SDP approached the Bermuda Department of Parks to potentially develop the program further. In October 2019, representatives of the Department of Parks and the SDP traveled to Kingston Marwood College, located in Dorset in the United Kingdom, which specializes in land-based studies to develop and deliver a series of training programs on island. Mr. Speaker, through this partnership, the SDP is just concluding a 5-day free training course in horticulture and arboriculture to locals within the industry, conducted by expertly qualified staff from the Kingston Marwood College in the UK. 35 individuals from various entities, including but not limited to the Corporation of Hamilton, BLDC, Port Royal Golf Course, and Gibbons Gardens, took advantage of this training to improve their respective skill sets. Mr. Speaker, this training was divided into 2 separate courses over the 5-day period, one being an introduction to chainsaw operations, which included safe operation, chainsaw maintenance, felling, cutting of trees, and cross-cutting, cutting across its main grain or axis of a tree. The other course being an introduction to practical horticultural skills, in which the attendees were taught how to work safely while demonstrating industry best practice in land cultivation, soil for sowing or planting, applying organic mulch, caring for a planted area, identifying plants and shrubs, and pruning techniques, cutting off dead, unwanted parts of a bush or tree. Today, the final day of these respective courses, the 35 participants will be assessed, and I anticipate all will pass and receive a KMC certificate to demonstrate their proficiency. With this certification, it is anticipated that these individuals' opportunities for educational scholarships and or employment will increase. Mr. Speaker, it should be noted that there has been a large surge in demand from other entities requesting to be included in any future training events, as well as those who have just completed the course, have shared their keen interest in participating in future training. Because of this interest, it is envisioned that this horticulture training program and partnership will continue and fruitfully grow over the years, pun intended. Mr. Speaker, these are the programs this government recognizes and expressly supports. I'd like to thank the Skills Development Program Board of Mr. Roger Paris, Ms. Cindy Young, Ms. Anna Fulton, Mr. James Gibbons, Ms. Melody Paris, Mr. Tamar Richards, and Mr. Clarence Santucci. I'd also like to thank the training team from Kingston Marwood College of Ms. Steph Addison, Ms. Joanna Jeffrey, and Mr. Nigel Hewish, who traveled to our island to conduct the training. And finally, thank you to all the technical officers within the Department of Parks for providing opportunities for those in the local horticulture industry to improve their skills. This government looks forward to seeing this program expand in the future and will continue to support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Tourism. Minister, would you like to present your statement?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Go right ahead, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I have a brief tabling statement in reference to the Tourism Investment Cambridge Beaches Resort and Spa Order 2022. Mr. Speaker, for growth and development, any economy requires investor confidence. That confidence is demonstrated in many ways. And in the hospitality business, investment in the physical plant and in the people who provide the service are key indicators. Mr. Speaker, I would summarize the general principle as follows. Investors are said to be confident when the news about the future is good. Mr. Speaker, I have today introduced for the consideration of this Honorable House an order proposed to be made under the Tourism Investment Act 2017. Mr. Speaker, this order is another tangible demonstration of the investor confidence that exists in Bermuda as a tourism destination. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will be familiar with the iconic property known as Cambridge Beaches and its significant history in the promotion and development of tourism in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, located in the west end of the island, the property is owned by Cambridge Beaches Holdings Limited, a Bermuda company, and I am pleased to advise this Honorable House that in addition to the considerable investment and upgrades already made to the property, the owners intend to renovate all the existing cottages, restaurants, spa, public areas, including the tennis courts, pools, and grounds. Mr. Speaker, this is a local company who have taken the vision of the original family owners and determined to build on it to the benefit of Bermuda's tourism product. This is the kind of development and growth that the Tourism Investment Act is designed to support. Honorable members will note that the terms of the order are in keeping with the existing provisions of the Act and represent the owner's ability to deliver on the plans and vision for the site. Mr. Speaker, as part of the consideration of the application for the relief provided under this Act, I took note of the owner's commitment to staffing the hotel. Mr. Speaker, Cambridge Beaches aims to ensure that Bermudian staff are continually trained and promoted through the ranks to provide the resort with a consistent level of service, longevity, and local hospitality ambiance. The owner is clear that the success of the resort has been and will continue to be dependent on its people. Cambridge Beaches will ensure that the resort continues to conduct comprehensive in-house training and refresher courses. Mr. Speaker, the news about the future of tourism is good. Tourism-related businesses are seeing a return of brisk trade, and the goal of the government is to facilitate the conditions for that growth to continue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Social Development and Seniors. Minister, would you like to present your statement at this time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I am delighted to inform this honorable House and our honorable members and the public of the recent launch of a landmark partnership between the United Nations and the government of Bermuda. The signing of the partnership agreement took place on Monday, the 27th of June, 2022, and the Minister of Social Development and Seniors signed the agreement on behalf of Bermuda's government and its people. This is the first ever partnership of its kind in Bermuda. We are now embarking on a new chapter of collaboration between the United Nations and Bermuda that will benefit Bermuda's people directly. Mr. Speaker, this joint UN development program entitled Building Back Equal through Innovative Financing for Gender Equality and Women Empowerment is being implemented in Bermuda with the assistance of the United Nations Women, or UN Women, and the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, and funded by the United Nations Joint Sustainable Development Goal, SDG Fund. This joint program is approximately a $1 million investment across two countries, Bermuda and Bahamas. However, Mr. Speaker, the project is expected to be a catalyst for millions of dollars more in additional investment to support the island's achievements in the targeted areas of sustainable development. Mr. Speaker, many in the community may be aware of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, which are a set of 17 interconnected goals referred to as Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. These goals were adopted by the UN member states in 2015 and underscored a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and improve the lives and prospects of everyone, everywhere. The United Nations SDG agenda is committed to leave no one behind. Mr. Speaker, this joint program supports Bermuda's economic recovery plan post-COVID-19 by diversifying Bermuda's economy through supporting growth of new opportunities. It focuses on empowering women, youth, and persons with disabilities to engage in key economic sectors such as agricultural, cultural, and creative industries, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, and sustainable tourism. It is intended that this joint program will enable Bermuda to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but in particular, goal number 5, gender equality, goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, and goal number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, this UN Bermuda program intends to provide a mix of solutions to assist Bermuda to build back equal post-COVID-19, but become a best practice example that will showcase how innovative financing vehicles, digital platforms, and women's empowerment principles can be leveraged to successfully close the financing gaps that female and youth entrepreneurs face. The program will provide opportunity to entrepreneurs to access additional capital and reduce risk. Mr. Speaker, the joint program aligns also with the government's national priorities and its commitment in advancing gender affairs, upholds the government's obligation to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, CEDAW, and supports the government's direction on moving beyond the pandemic in the context of rebuilding Bermuda's economic recovery from COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, on June 27, 2022, the program was launched at the Guado Bay Beach Resort. The event was distinguished with cultural touches of Bermuda performances from the youth and women and supported by the presence of the iconic Royal Bermuda Regiment Band and the Gumbays. Amongst those who attended were Her Excellency the Governor, yourself, the Honorable Speaker of the House, Honorable Members Peets, Honorable Member Hayward, First Lady Madam Burt, Junior Minister Simmons, and Senator Hodgson. At the launch, the speakers included the head of the UN delegation, Dr. Gary Conneal, resident coordinator, Recorded remarks were provided by Ms. Lisa Cabell, head of the Secretariat, United Nations Joint SDG Fund. Dr. Canal was also supported by Ms. Tani Ann Bodber, representative for the UN Women's Multi-Country Office Caribbean, Robert Almeida, managing partner of Portland Private Equity, and Mrs. Denise Antonio, UND resident representative for Jamaica, Belize, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, the Bahamas, and the Turks and Caicos Islands, and Bermuda's very own Mackenzie Kiltucket of Girl Empower. The 5 officials of the UN were supported by a contingent of highly skilled specialists. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda became a signatory to the Multi-Country Sustainable Development Corporation framework. This agreement at Cabinet Office with Acting Premier, the Honorable Diallo Rabin, JPMP, present at this event, the multi-country framework allows the UN to engage Bermuda more effectively while leveraging expertise across specific UN agencies, funds, and programs, which is a first in Bermuda's history. Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, the 28th of June, 2022, the UN delegation held stakeholder engagements throughout the day that allowed attendees to learn more about the joint SDG Fund program and its opportunities. Attendees included staff from our government agencies, and representatives from the arts, banking, business, cultural, educational, environmental, financial, legal, youth, and sports sector, to name a few. The ministry anticipates that over this 2-year period, there will be more opportunities for holding further stakeholder engagement. The ministry remains committed to updating the public on the developments of this program in the future. Mr. Speaker, the next steps will be to conduct an assessment of innovative financing for gender equality and the impact of COVID-19. As you may know, Mr. Speaker, our island's economy has been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The GDP was expected to have contracted about 9% in 2020, and sectors such as tourism and hospitality have seen a profound downturn. Mr. Speaker, the unemployment rate, which was estimated at 3.8% in November 2019, had more than doubled to 7.9% by the end of 2020. Youth unemployment rates increased significantly, jumping from 18.8% in 2019 to 31.1% in 2020. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, women reported considerably higher rates of underemployment, with 3,250 women reporting underemployment compared to 1,727 males. Mr. Speaker, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres recognizes the unique vulnerabilities that pose a threat to small islands, which can easily derail their development regardless of country income classification. As a small island, Bermuda, like other small islands, there are factors like climate change, natural hazards, and pandemics that have and will continue to exacerbate gender inequalities, social economic vulnerabilities, and risk reversing strong development gains. Mr. Speaker, throughout this partnership, the United Nations will support Bermuda's resilience and advance sustainable development with program approaches which seek to leave no one behind. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the UN contingent, Mr. Robert Almeida, managing partner of Portland Private Equity. I would like to thank my hard-working team at the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors, who have partnered with the UN team, headed by Permanent Secretary Ms. Marva Jean O'Brien, Ms. Kalita Pitcher, Ms. Alicia Lister, and Mr. Gabriel Brooms. Further, I would like to thank the protocol team, Mr. Gilbert Rawlings, Ms. Carol Hayward, Mr. Brandon Souza, and Ms. Tracy Wilkinson. The communication team of Ms. Alicia Trott, Ms. Tina Evans, Ms. Dana Selassie. I would like to also thank those participants who made this 2-day event a success, such as the In Motion Dance School, Tiffany Fox of String Collective, Mr. Zane Hendrickson, the H&H Gumby Troop, Mr. Marcel Dill, 5-Star Transportation Services, Wanderlust Explorers Limited, and Mr. Dean Paris. I would like to thank all the attendees who were at the launch, and the stakeholder engagements. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Minister. The next statement is also yours, Minister. Would you like to present that now?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Continue right ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to report to this honorable House the continuing progress with regards to the ministry's ongoing commitment to embedding a sound litigation guardian service framework into Bermuda's court. As you may recall, the litigation guardian service operates as a mechanism of child safeguarding under the provision of the Children's Act of 1998, Section 35 and 36. In particular, it states that for the purpose of any specified proceedings, the court shall appoint a litigation guardian for the child concerned unless satisfied that it is not necessary to do so to safeguard his interests. Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to report that considerable progress has been made since I last reported this matter to you on the 22nd of April. New litigation guardians have been selected and will be gazetted in this month of July. This will increase the capacity in the service at a time when courts are rightly making more appointments of litigation guardians because of the increased complexity of issues facing our children and young people in Bermuda. One guardian is being enhanced service coordination responsibilities. This will enable the court to have a point of contact within the service when an appointment is needed. And it will enable the new litigation guardians to be mentored at the outset of their appointment. This is seen as an important aspect of the program. Undoubtedly, the new appointees are all highly experienced. However, being a litigation guardian is a specialist role, and having a coordinator who has had a lengthy experience of operating in the role will add value to this initiative. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to inform you that on the 13th and 14th of June, social workers from DCFS and the new litigation guardians were trained in how to write court reports, which bring out the voice of the child as the centerpiece of the report, around which all other information revolves. The purpose of the litigation guardian is to inform the court about the voice of the child, along with their professional analysis of what needs to happen going forward to guarantee that child's safety and well-being. As with the training in February, which I reported to you in April, this training was jointly carried out by the staff from the Department of Child and Family Services and Mr. Anthony Douglas, CBE, the UK FCDO consultant, who continues to support us by developing this crucial service for our children. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors has now convened and held 2 meetings of the Litigation Guardian Steering Committee. The committee is providing oversight and direction to the development of the service. This involves scrutinizing, amending, and ratifying practice guidance for the Litigation Guardian Service, endorsing a new fit-for-purpose contract for litigation guardians, and considering which changes to the wider family justice system are needed for the guardian service to be able to work to the highest possible standard. Mr. Speaker, as we continue to make progressive steps to ensure the safeguarding of our children, I want to thank all involved for what they are doing and our wider community for giving their support to this valuable service, which gives the most vulnerable children and young people in Bermuda going through the family court process an independent voice in court proceedings. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Economy and Labor. Minister, would you like to put your statement this morning?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I rise before this honorable House to provide an update on passport processing. Several weeks ago, the Bermuda public was advised of passport processing delays of 11 weeks. As the Minister responsible for the Department of Immigration, today I will provide an overview of the operational challenges before us, outline steps we are taking to address this issue, and report on a new and more realistic timeline for processing passports. First and foremost, I want to apologize for the continued delays in processing British Overseas Territory Citizen Bermuda passports, which are now exceeding the 11-week time frame. I recognize and appreciate that the processing delays interfere with Bermudans' ability to plan and book travel. cases, despite applications submitted early, travel plans have had to change. Many have been disappointed by the service output, and I want to assure you that this is being addressed. I empathize deeply with Bermuda passport holders who are experiencing firsthand the frustration and inconvenience of the delays in passport processing. The issues are real and impact on our daily lives. I know of individuals who will miss weddings, graduations, family gatherings, training courses, and business meetings, all because they don't have their passport. I see these individuals as I go through my daily life. I receive the phone calls and emails. I am aware of these serious and important concerns, and I can assure you that I know that we must do better. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that the Department of Immigration has long had operational challenges and has experienced backlogs from time to time. Since midway through the pandemic, the department noticed a marked increase in passport applications after a long period of lower than normal overseas travel. However, now the current volume of passport applications is not sustainable given the number of staff who process passports at the Department of Immigration. In particular, since March 2022, the number of applications has quadrupled and continues to increase as more Bermudans desire to travel during the summer. With approximately 2 years of restrictive travel, the desire to get off the rock is certainly understandable and necessary. Mr. Speaker, operational challenges within the Department of Immigration present constant pressure as the Bermuda passport team does its best to move applications along. I want to remind the public that Bermuda passports are no longer approved or printed in Bermuda. In 2016, the UK government unilaterally removed Bermuda's ability to print passports. As a result, passport applications are sent to Her Majesty's Passport Office in the UK, which manages the process. Her Majesty's Passport Office can and have made changes, two of which, introduced in 2016 and 2021, were significant to the process, and each British overseas territory was required to comply. As of August 2016, before we can send applications to Her Majesty's Passport Office, the Bermuda passport team are required to identify each applicant is entitled to a BOTC passport. More recently, in August 2021, the team must also determine whether an applicant is a dual British citizen or not. With both changes, there is a requirement to enter detailed information in the passport application system so that Her Majesty's Passport Office can readily assess each application and carry the process through to printing the passports. Mr. Speaker, the highlighted changes require diligence, attention to detail, and the ability to accurately interpret the British Nationality Act 1981 as matched with each application's demographic profile. Hearing and identifying entitlement and dual citizenship can have a more significant impact on future applications for a BOTC Bermuda passport. Before August 2016, the remit to identify entitlements was left to only a few staff of the Bermuda passport team. Before August 2021, there was no requirement to know about British citizenship. Now the entire team must be knowledgeable, and this required training and in some cases work shadowing. The process of verification has created an administrative challenge, which is exacerbated by the high volumes of applications that have been submitted to the department. Mr. Speaker, noting the resource challenges the department currently faces, the department will seek to onboard additional staff to assist with the current high volume of applications. The ministry has received approval from the Ministry of Finance to onboard additional staff to assist with the administrative processing of passports. Over the long term, it is anticipated that a permanent solution to the department's general challenges and specific passport processing challenges would include an organizational review, a departmental reorganization, additional resources, implementation of an improved and final technology solution. It still remains the government's primary priority to have passports processed in Bermuda. I will now provide an update on the new processing timelines for passport applications. Mr. Speaker, the current processing times have, in some cases, been up to 20 weeks. It is anticipated that with the addition of new staff, the process will return to 11 weeks. Lastly, let me discuss the parameters for emergency passports. Mr. Speaker, while the need for emergency travel may arise, the Bermuda passport team undertake each request on a case-by-case basis with the goal of reserving a stock of emergency passports books for bona fide emergencies. The reason for issuing emergency BOTC Bermuda passports are limited because we utilize the guidelines of Her Majesty's Passport Office. Additionally, it is important that we adhere to the guidelines as best as possible because of the limited supply of emergency travel documents that the Department of Immigration has in stock. The Department of Immigration has been advised by Her Majesty's Passport Office that once the current stock of emergency travel documents have been exhausted, we will not be receiving any additional emergency travel documents. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I again apologize to the Bermudian public for the passport processing delays and all the inconveniences they have caused. Despite this, I want to reassure you that the Department of Immigration remains committed to resolving these challenges so that passports are issued as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement is also in the minister's name. Minister, would you like to continue with your next statement?
Mr. Speaker, this statement is the establishment of a project management office. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to provide an update on the establishment of the Economic Recovery Plan Project Management Office. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will recall responsibility for the implementation of the Economic Recovery Plan transferred to the Ministry of Economy and Labor in February of this year. In March, I reported to this honorable House the government had identified 4 lead initiatives: the rehabilitation of Times Bay infrastructure, the development of Uptown Northeast Hamilton, the development of the casino industry, and the development of vertical farming. KPMG had been charged with working with stakeholders to deliver detailed action plans, setting out key milestones, timelines, actions. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that the detailed action plans for each of the 4 priority initiatives were completed in April, and stakeholders have continued the work required to move these initiatives forward. Honorable members are reminded that the aim of the ERP is to produce jobs, increase GDP, and combined with other measures, lead us to a sustainable future. Mr. Speaker, to ensure successful implementation of the 31 initiatives under the ERP umbrella, the government committed to the establishment of a dedicated project management office. The project management office started its function on the 1st of June 2022. The goal of the ERP project management office is first and foremost to ensure successful implementation of all the initiatives under the Economic Recovery Plan, working to monitor, track, report, and lend assistance where required, while placing significant emphasis on the 4 lead policy initiatives. Mr. Speaker, while the government had initially intended to retain consulting resources who would be dedicated to the PMO effort, I am pleased to report the identification of talented and qualified public officers who have been reassigned to the PMO. The PMO has been established under the leadership of Mr. Roger Todd, program leader, on a 2-year reassignment from his directorship role. Mr. Todd is an accomplished business leader and professional engineer with extensive experience in developing and managing major capital projects and change initiatives. Most notably, Mr. Todd led the electrification of the public bus fleet, the transition to LED street lighting, and permitting of the recently constructed North Power Station. Additionally, Mr. Richard Hazelwood has been reassigned to the role of PMO Monitoring Officer from his substantive post of Quality Assurance Officer. Mr. Hazelwood has a background in engineering and accounting with extensive project management experience. He has previously participated in the implementation of other significant government policy initiatives, such as public access to information and digitization of the government post service. The PMO office is co-located in an area in the government administrative building next to the Office of Project Management and Procurement, and a central physical placement to ensure effective collaboration given the infrastructure-rich priority initiatives. By securing internal resources to lead out in the ERP PMO by securing internal resources to lead out in the ERP project management office in a close to cost neutral scenario, the government is now able to allocate its limited resources to retain subject matter experts to become directly engaged in progressing the individual initiatives on a project by project basis as required, particularly the lead initiatives. Mr. Speaker, I will now provide a brief update on our progress on these priorities. On the matter of water and waste treatment facility, the rehabilitation of the Times Bay infrastructure plant features heavily in this initiative, and a full business case for its replacement is a work in progress as the initial first step. This phase is expected to be completed in the coming months. The Uptown Development Authority in Northeast Hamilton has been associated with the Southeast Hamilton Initiative to facilitate synergies. The ministry is currently working via the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation Board to incorporate its views on the implementation plan. The casino industry plan is currently with the Casino Gaming Commission as we look to ensure a strong partnership between the Commission and the Department of Workforce Development to prepare local talent to participate in this sector. And finally, on the matter of the vertical farming facility, while the details of the financing for this large-scale farm are being finalized, planning towards leveraging this initiative to support the development of small and medium-sized vertical farms has been advanced. Internal consultation has commenced and will be followed by consultation with the local farmers to ensure they are supported and have an opportunity to fully participate in this sector. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the government's focused attention, honorable members will already know ERP milestones in other areas have been achieved. Notably, the Economic Investment Certificate is generating millions of dollars of new investment in Bermuda and is being used as an effective tool to encourage high net worth individuals to make substantial economic investments in Bermuda. I will provide a further update to this Honorable House in due course. Further measures to expand the population, especially the process for long-term residents to apply for permanent residency in Bermuda, has been addressed with a view to retaining these important stakeholders. Since January 1st, 2022, the Department of Immigration has received applications under these legislative amendments. The legislative framework for the subsea communication sector is complete, and promotions have been commenced to build awareness of Bermuda as a North Atlantic communications hub. The online single market enterprise marketplace by Bermuda is live, with efforts now underway to increase its effectiveness for the benefit of local entrepreneurs providing access to the global online marketplace. Mr. Speaker, I trust that it is clear that the government is committed to safeguarding and growing the Bermuda economy. To be sure, the ERP PMO will be focused on implementation by monitoring long-term initiatives, supplementing department's project management, day-to-day robust focus on deliverables, and providing specialist skills. The PMO will use reputable project management tools to manage, track, and report on the economic recovery plan. Additionally, the PMO will provide regular updates via the government website on the ERP initiatives. To this end, the public can expect that the ERP section of the government portal will be updated shortly and will continue to be updated quarterly thereafter. The government will issue a public advisory once the July updates are available. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Education. Minister, would you like to present that statement?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Just give me a second.
Yes. You're ready,
Mr.
Administrator.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning before this honorable house to keep my honorable colleagues and the general public informed about the exciting work that continues in support of education reform, and more specifically about the introduction of signature learning programs in September 2022 for our two senior schools, the Barkley Institute and Cedar Ridge Academy. Mr. Speaker, this will be a first time for our students, a first time for our schools, and a first time for Bermuda. A milestone indeed. We are very proud of the work that has been undertaken today. Mr. Speaker, the last time I provided this House with an update on the signature learning programs for our senior schools was in May 2022. Since then, the work has intensified. Mr. Speaker, this morning I want to share with my honorable colleagues the education reform work during the past weeks as it relates to 1, the experience of our students, 2, professional learning days for school staff, 3, new school transformation teams, and 4, good governance. This is quite a bit, Mr. Speaker, but as I said, the work has intensified. However, it has also proven to be work of excellence. Let me first begin with the experience of our students. In a previous statement read in the House in May this year, I shared that in September 2022, incoming S1 students entering the Barkley Institute and Cedar Ridge Academy will be educated in a way that has never been done before. The incoming S1 students will, in addition to their core curriculum, have access to a signature curriculum which is relevant for our children, for Bermuda, and globally. Our S1 students will experience a model of teaching and learning which incorporates authentic, real-world learning experiences and meaningful projects attentive to the different needs of each and every child. The graduation requirements will ensure that children who leave with the Bermuda Signature School Diploma will have the necessary experience, knowledge, values, and relationships to take up jobs or apprenticeships in their chosen profession or trade and contribute to the requirements for entry into colleges and universities. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to share that all of the prerequisite work to prepare us for a successful launch in September 2022 is on solid ground. The Board of Governors and the school leaderships of both senior schools have confidently stated that they are ready to receive young people in September 2022 and provide them with 21st century learning experiences and opportunities. Mr. Speaker, every journey worth taking begins with a critical starting point to get to the end goal. There has been a journey for the adults in the education system to help us achieve our desired future state. I have shared on many occasions in this honorable House the work of the adults in system transformation. Mr. Speaker, it is equally important for this honorable House to understand the student experience in this journey to get them ready to select their desired signature learning program, the desired signature learning program that supports their passions and interests. In preparation for September 2022, program was created to engage current M3 students and parents in a taster program that took them through a journey of self-reflection into their own passions and interests and exposure to the opportunities and careers of the signature learning program on offer at our two senior schools. Through regular communication and shared resources and activities with M3 teams and families, conversations and research into the various signature tracks went beyond the classrooms. At home, parents were able to talk with their children about the opportunities ahead. Mr. Speaker, the involvement of parents engaging their children at home was critical. In the end, the response to the taster program for both educators and students was very positive. Educators found it particularly helpful for the young people to have the opportunity to discuss their talents, interests, values, passions, and strengths, and learn more about who they are as an individual. For students, there was excitement on how their current interests could translate into a wide range of career options. In fact, the process was most inspiring for some. Mr. Speaker, let me share comments made by some of our M3 students that's extremely encouraging. One M3 student stated, "This has made me look into going away to university, which I was unsure about before." Another M3 student shared, "By doing a taster, I found out some new things about myself that led to interest in new careers. It was very helpful as I was able to learn new things about digital marketing, sales manager, interior design, all of which interest me." Yet another M3 student stated, "Prior to the taster program, I had my mind made up that I was going to do a particular career. However, the program opened my eyes to different career paths. This comment encapsulates the ultimate goal for our young people as it pertains to the process of selecting their signature pathway. Mr. Speaker, a longer, more comprehensive taster program is currently under development. The positive and constructive feedback we have received from our students that allowed the school choice team to refine the work for the next set of M3 students. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the collective hard work of the staff of the Department of Education and the School Choice Working Group, I am pleased to celebrate that out of the approximately 300 incoming S1 students enrolled for September 2022, over 90 have selected a signature learning track. The remaining students, while having selected a general track, will still be immersed in the new features of learning and schooling. Mr. Speaker, I now wish to share about professional learning days for school staff. In May of this year, I announced early school closure for the 2021-22 school year. The rationale behind being to continue to engage each and every teacher across the island in professional learning on the features of our transformed system. The continued transformation of our school system is a complex and challenging undertaking that requires the engagement of every educator. The extra 3 days at the end of the term allow for schools to work with undivided attention, ensuring that we are even more prepared for the next design and implementation phases. Our currently established senior school signature transformation teams and subject teachers had the opportunity to refine and finalize the curriculum, scheduling, and other features of the signature learning programs in September 2022. At the same time, the remaining senior staff members were engaged in professional learning communities where they gained more insight into the major features of signature learning that have been under development for the last 2 years. Simultaneously, our preschools, primary schools, and middle schools engaged in professional learning to expand their knowledge around high-impact teaching strategies. Over the 3 days, they took opportunities to determine implementations of these best practices in their buildings when school commences in September 2022. Additionally, our 2 new parish primary school transformation teams, along with their entire school staff, worked rigorously to begin development of our transformed parish primary school set to open in September 2023. Mr. Speaker, I would now like to expand a bit more on the new school transformation teams. The Ministry of Education has now onboarded the second wave of school transformation teams to participate in the designing, prototyping, and implementation of new models of teaching, learning, and schooling for September 2023. These school transformation teams will bring together education professionals, parents, business, and community members who are passionate about redesigning Bermuda's public schools to best prepare our young people for a purposeful and thriving future. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to share that we have received nearly 100 expressions of interest from educators and community members to work towards transforming our first set of parish primary schools at Purvis Primary and Francis Patton School sites and designing our next signature school to implement hospitality and tourism and education service tracks. The past few weeks of onboarding and early stages of designing and co-creating has set the stage for development of this next phase of the transformation. Mr. Speaker, the last topic I want to share about is governance. Research shows that lessons from high-performing education systems look beyond teaching and learning to focus on ensuring the policy, governance, and operational systems are in place to ensure the success of all educators. Plan 2022 recognized and called for a review of the system's current structure, and Bermuda First called for the introduction of an education authority in their 2019 Future State Report. Mr. Speaker, there needs to be good governance to sustain and support reform. Governance that's not subject to day-to-day political interference. Governance that has the independence to be flexible and agile in ensuring that the needs of Bermuda's children, economy, community are best and efficiently served. We all acknowledge that the relationships of schools and school boards with the Ministry and Department of Education are not and have not been as free-flowing as we would like. The establishment of an education authority will be an opportunity to reset, renew, and clarify these relationships. We need to learn from the past to create a better future. Mr. Speaker, an education authority is needed to take the politics out of education and make public education, nimbler and responsive. The authority will be responsible for all aspects of public education in Bermuda and hold a dual focus of equity and accountability. Mr. Speaker, the work to create an education authority and continue towards education reform and school transformation is well underway. Currently, the Education Authority Working Group is creating the framework for what the Education Authority will look like. They're currently receiving feedback from the Department of Education, existing school boards, and other relevant stakeholders. The working group will continue to meet and collect data to help formalize the proposals as we move forward. Mr. Speaker, some critical action steps taken have been: 1, meeting with schools to understand the strengths and weaknesses of school boards. 2, scanning governance arrangements into high-performance systems with characteristics of an education authority. 3, reviewing the research on governance and leadership of successful 21st century learning systems. 4, reviewing relevant private and government acts and memoranda of understanding between the Ministry of Education and schools. 5, exploring management structures and practices in 21st century learning systems. And 6, developing and agreeing on revised roles and responsibilities for school boards. Mr. Speaker, the Education Authority Working Group has much work ahead and is progressing steadily to see this governing structure come to fruition for our public school system. In closing, Mr. Speaker, and casting my mind back over the past 28 months, the transformative work has been challenging, fast-paced, and rigorous, with little time to rest for those involved in education reform. At this time, I would like to extend my gratitude and appreciation to everyone who is committed and participated collaboratively in co-designing the learning experiences of excellence that have gone in place for our young people. I await September 2022 with great anticipation to see our young people start a journey of exploration and growth as they experience our first ever signature learning programs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is from the Minister of National Security. Minister, would you like to put your statement?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to provide an update on the Bermuda Fire Rescue Service Airport Operations Division. Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda Fire Rescue Service operates the airport rescue firefighting services, which provides aircraft rescue and firefighting services for the IFB International Airport. This is an essential service that enables the airport to serve international commercial flights. Mr. Speaker, Sky Airport is the ILFB International Airport's aerodrome certificate holder. The certificate is issued by the Bermuda Civil Aviation Authority to Sky Airport.
Speaker, it's vote 3 by 3.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, the airport rescue firefighting services is retained.
It's a vote 3 by 3.
Minister, may I just see if you can get a little closer to your mic? Your camera's fine, but just got a little audio feedback. You may have something on in there. Or...
No, sounds back. Sounds back, Mr. Speaker.
Still getting a little feedback.
Let me try something. Hear me now?
Still here, we got the feedback.
Still there? Feedback?
Yeah.
We confirm, Speaker, it's distorted slightly.
Yeah, it's a distorted sound.
Yeah, we can just hear it, yeah.
So should I try to vote the picture and see how it does?
Shut the camera off and just see if it gives you. It could be a bandwidth weakness, but let us hear you.
Can you hear me now?
It's still got the distortion, so you can turn the camera back on, and we'll see if it improves as you go along.
Okay.
So continue.
Okay, should I start over?
Yeah, you can go where you are. You can continue.
Okay. Speaker, airport rescue firefighting services is a retained government service as part of the airport project between Skyport and the Bermuda Airport Authority. The Bermuda Airport Authority are responsible for managing the retained government service and have transferred responsibility for the delivery of the airport rescue firefighting services to the Bermuda Fire Rescue Service by made of a memorandum of understanding in 2007 with an amendment in 2017. There is no fee paid by Skyport to the Bermuda Airport Authority or
Minister, let me pause you for a minute. let me go to the next statement and then see if you guys could technically work out your problem so we can hear you clear. I'll come back to you. How's that? And what I may suggest that if you can't resolve it there, do you have your phone or something you can come on? Maybe you can leave your camera on and just talk to your phone. Maybe the clarity will come through better on your phone if you can bring it up on your phone or your tablet.
Yes, okay, I'll try.
Okay, well, let us work with Minister Health for the time being, and we'll come back to you after her statement. Thank you. Members, I appreciate that indulgence. Minister Health, can we call on you this time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead, Minister Health.
Mr. Speaker and honorable members, yesterday, June 30th, our mass vaccination program ended, a campaign that saw over 75% of the total population fully immunized and over 85% of the eligible population either vaccinated or fully immunized since our vaccination program began on January 11th, 2021. Bermuda residents have received approximately 135,000 vaccinations, and this indeed is great news for Bermuda. Our vaccination program went tremendously well. Bermuda's COVID-19 vaccination program surpassed the World Health Organization's goal of 70% immunization of a population ahead of the June 30th target. As a reminder, Mr. Speaker, Bermuda launched its vaccine awareness program in January of 2021, ahead of the Pfizer vaccines arriving in Bermuda. The objective was to make everyone aware of the benefits of getting the vaccine and encourage Bermuda's seniors, those 65 years and older, those most at risk, to sign up and get vaccinated. Mr. Speaker, with the assistance of Government House, on behalf of the Government of Bermuda and the assistance of the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, the first shipment of 9,750 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, arrived on January 8th as scheduled on the British Airways flight. The second shipment of 19,500 arrived on January 29th. Bermuda was one of 4 UK overseas territories to receive a share of the first batch of vaccines. After the most vulnerable in Bermuda were vaccinated, the campaign moved on to people over the age of 50 and then to the general population. Mr. Speaker, you would remember that a lot of work went into our vaccination awareness program. Many social media campaigns, radio talk shows, press conferences, Facebook Live sessions, several media interviews, and extensive interviews on local radio stations providing information and addressing some of the misconceptions and myths that exist around getting the vaccine, included but not limited to infertility and blood clots, amongst other concerns. Mr. Speaker, a hard push was implemented through our close-to-home mobile vaccination program in neighborhoods island-wide. With a free minibus service, this program ensured that transportation to a vaccination center was not a barrier to getting a vaccine. Mr. Speaker, the close-to-home program, which was subtly operationalized and managed by the Bermuda Health Council, was also an ideal opportunity to learn more for those people who wanted to hear about the COVID-19 vaccine from a trusted source. Over the past 18 months, Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 vaccines were also available at the Bermuda Police Recreational Club, the Bermuda College, the King Edward Memorial Hospital, Edgewood Pediatric Services, and the Hamilton Health Center. Mr. Speaker, we had pop-up clinics at Fairmont Southampton, Hamilton Princess and Beach Club, Linda's Supermarket, the National Sports Center, Pier 6, and the Christen Building. Mr. Speaker, the ministry's community outreach team worked to reach seniors and partnered with agencies such as Age Concern and the Red Cross. The collective efforts made by the community as a whole were priceless, including the support provided by the Bermuda Frontline Foundation and individual citizens throughout the community. Additionally, in recent months, Mr. Speaker, a number of health service providers had vaccination clinics, including Somerset Pharmacy, We Care Pediatrics, Edgewood Pediatric Services, Omni Medical, North Shore Medical, Summers Medical Services, Bermuda Healthcare Services, and the Bermuda Diabetes Association. Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, it has been a busy 18 months of vaccinating our community largely for free with numerous locations around the island. There were no stones unturned to ensure that everyone who wanted to get vaccinated had easy access. In addition to the Ministry of Health staff, who work between testing and contact tracing and case management, often in addition to their day jobs as community nurses, we welcomed the necessary assistance of the Bermuda Hospitals Board and the staff, general practitioners, pharmacists, advanced EMTs, dentists, vets, and retired nurses. This collective effort placed Bermuda among the top countries in the world for vaccinations administered per capita. Mr. Speaker, as minister and on behalf of the ministry, I cannot thank these professionals enough. Their dedication to the island's well-being is truly stellar. Our success in dealing with COVID-19 was and still is a community effort. I am truly grateful to everyone involved, and I am also grateful to the many individuals in our community who got vaccinated. Mr. Speaker, those that came when we started 18 months ago, those that waited until they were eligible and registered as soon as they did, those who were sitting on the fence, undecided, and eventually got vaccinated, thank you to everyone. Mr. Speaker, the coronavirus vaccine is key to living safely with COVID-19. It reduces the severity of COVID-19 if you get infected, and it reduces hospitalizations and deaths. The Ministry of Health recognizes that this pandemic would have been far worse if not for the level of vaccination in our community. And we know that vaccines work, and we have the data to prove it. We are pausing our vaccination program for a few months now as the demand was insufficient to warrant another shipment. However, to those not yet vaccinated but considering, I urge you to seek information from a credible source to help you make the decision. We have worked hard to reach this point in the pandemic, and I want to thank the entire Bermuda community for all of their efforts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Health. Members, will, as I indicated just now, allow us to go back to the Minister of National Security. Minister, would you like to present yours now?
Mr. Speaker, can you hear me?
Nice and clear. Yes, we can
Nice
hear
and
you.
clear now?
Yes, continue.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to provide an update on the Bermuda Fire Rescue Service Airport Operations Division. Is that better, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, continue.
Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda Fire Rescue Service operates the airport rescue firefighting services. It provides aircraft rescue and firefighting services for the Al Atwed International Airport. I need some indulgence, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, they're over here. You're fine.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Speaker, Skyport is the Al-Atwed International Airport's aerodrome certificate holder. A certificate is issued by the Bermuda Civil Aviation Authority to Skyport. The Airport Rescue Firefighting Services is a retained government service as part of the airport project agreement between Skyport and the Bermuda Airport Authority. The Bermuda Airport Authority are responsible for managing the retained government service and have transferred responsibility for the delivery of the airport rescue firefighting services to the Bermuda Fire Rescue Service by way of a memorandum of understanding in 2007 with an amendment in 2017. There is no fee paid by Skyport to the Bermuda Airport Authority or the Bermuda Fire and Rescue Service for this service. Mr. Speaker, since 1995, the accepted minimum duty strength at the airport has required 3 crews of 5 firefighters, which has enabled the airport to provide a response category rating of 9. A rating of 9 is required for large commercial jets, including British Airways, Boeing 777 aircraft service to Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, a February 2022 Skyport audit of the Airport Operations Division increased the required firefighter minimum duty strength from 5 per crew to 14 per crew in order to maintain a Category 9 response rating for the airport. Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda Airport Authority have retained a UK Civil Aviation Authority rescue firefighting expert to review the revised requirements and minimum duty strength. The expert has completed his on-island review, and his report is expected shortly. This will form the basis of further discussions on the minimum duty strength requirements at the airport with Skyport and the Bermuda Civil Aviation Authority. Mr. Speaker, in the interim, meetings with the stakeholders, including airlines, have resulted in agreement for an interim variable Category 5 to Category 7 response for the airport, with British Airways continuing to provide service with the Category 7 rating. In order to meet the Category 7 rating, the Bermuda Fire Rescue Service have to provide 8 certified airport rescue firefighters per crew, as well as have a firefighting vehicle positioned adjacent to the runway for each arrival and departure. To meet this requirement, existing firefighters have been required to work significant extra shifts and overtime hours. This, Mr. Speaker, is unsustainable. Mr. Speaker, not all of Bermuda's firefighters are certified aircraft rescue firefighters. In order for the Bermuda Fire Rescue Service to meet the staffing requirements at the airport in the short term, we have had to source overseas firefighters that are certified aircraft rescue firefighters to bolster our numbers. To that end, we have sourced 10 suitably qualified firefighters to come to Bermuda in July, initially for 3 months to give our local airport firefighters the relief they need. Mr. Speaker, I can also advise that we have begun a local recruitment campaign for an initial batch of 11 firefighters to further bolster the ranks of the service. To be certified aircraft rescue firefighters, the firefighter recruits require specialist overseas training, and this with their other local training can take over 3 months. Mr. Speaker, the 10 overseas firefighters are a temporary measure to ensure that the airport continues to operate as normal. Once we have agreed the final minimum duty strength requirements for the airport, we will look at all options for meeting those requirements, and I will provide an update to this honorable House at that time. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to thank the women and men of the Bermuda Fire Rescue Service for their service, and in particular, to those who have stepped up at the airport to meet this challenge. I would also like to thank the executive of the Fire Service Association for their support in this matter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, that brings us to a close this morning of the statements by ministers and junior ministers. Long session. We'll now move on to the next item on the order paper, which is reports of committees. There are none. Question period. Members, as we look to start the question period, that 11 after 12, so we've got some time before the 12:30, so we can go ahead and get started there. There aren't any written questions this morning, so the questions today will come from generated from the statements that were given this morning. And the first this morning that has a question would be from the Premier, from your first statement this morning on the update to the financial performance. Premier, you have a question from MP Kennedy. Amendment is now 12:12. We will start the clock for 60 minutes. MP Kennedy, would you like to put your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to all colleagues and to Bermuda. I'm not sure what page number this is. It's the page before the ending of this particular statement. Very bottom of the page where the Premier talks about gasoline prices. This page 5. Page 5. Just want to point him to that area. Mr. Speaker, the question I have is down at the bottom of the he says this price freeze of gasoline saves $23 on the average size car tank, and I'm trying to understand. Okay, it's a bit opaque. It's not completely transparent. Is he talking about $23 as an annual savings, weekly savings for a tank? I'm trying to understand that.
Thank you. Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm certainly happy to clarify for the honorable member, who I'm certain knows a little bit about gasoline prices.
My interest, yes.
No problem. Well, that's another thing. I'm just saying. So, Mr. Speaker, when we were calculating the savings that were due to the members of the public, I certainly did reach out to, funny enough, one of the honorable member's former colleagues who used to serve this honorable chamber, who I know sells vehicles, and I asked him, what is the average size of a tank for a private car in Bermuda? He told me 40 liters per tank. And Mr. Speaker, what is important to note that if the government took no action, as per the pricing mechanism that has been in place since 1979, the cost of gasoline in Bermuda would be $2.91 per liter. Sorry, I should say $2.92 per liter, Mr. Speaker. However, gasoline is only $2.34 a liter. That is a difference of 57.5 cents on each liter. And if we multiply that by 40, that equates to $23. So that means that persons in this country filling up an average size tank of gasoline would pay $23 less than they would have if this government did not take action on freezing gasoline prices.
Supplementary?
It's off you. It's off you.
Oh, yeah.
Supplementary?
Yeah, supplementary to that. The Premier was all over the place there. I just want to make sure that the public understands exactly what they are getting back in savings on this tank. He spoke in terms of liters, and as you know, Bermudians understand the lingo is in gallons. So I'd appreciate it if he goes forward, if he can help everyone in speaking in gallons when he talks about the average size of tanks and the savings that we are getting at the pump. The question I have, supplementary question, is based on 3 months ago when the Premier put in this price freeze. Can he tell us how much the increase was at that time that he prevented from putting in place? Was it 0.4? Was it 0.6? What was it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will try to answer the question and provide the answers which I gave before to the honorable member. Mr. Speaker, first thing is that gasoline prices as published and priced in Bermuda are done in liters. But for the benefit to the honorable member, my spreadsheet certainly does contain the calculation in gallons. And so I'm happy to share that information for him. Prior to the increase, gas was...
That's not for me. This is for the public.
Yeah, yes. When we try to bring information, we're doing it for not only knowledge of those in the House, but those in the listening audience.
You buy gas, you buy it in gallons.
Yes.
No problem, Mr. Speaker. I will respond to the question because I have the answers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The difference in the price of a gallon of gasoline is $2.18, Mr. Speaker. And so if the government did not take action, gasoline would be $2.18 higher, and that is a 25% difference, as is stated here in the statement on page 5.
Mr. Speaker,
Supplementary?
no, this is, I don't think the Premier is answering the question that I asked. We know that the price of fuel went up by 0.4. That's where it was frozen. So are you saying that that's not $2 and something cents? The price of fuel 3 months ago was, let's just say, it was $8. It went up by 0.4. The price increase to the retailer at the selling the gas went up by 0.4. Not $2.75. It went up by 0.4 per gallon, per liter, sorry. So what I'm trying to ascertain is when he froze the price, did he freeze the 0.4 increase or did he, that's what I'm trying to ascertain. He didn't freeze it by $2 per liter.
So I'm trying to get a clear point from your question. Your question is that at that stage, the increase would have been a 0.4 increase.
Yeah.
And you're trying to ask that the price was frozen at that 0.4 increase?
What was the increase 3 months ago that he froze? He's saying it's $2 and something cents. It's not. Per liter.
I mean, can you decipher the question that's trying to be generated over there?
Mr. Speaker, I'll do my best to answer. All the information that the Honorable Opposition Leader is asking is not readily in front of me. I'm prepared for some questions. I can get that. But here, allow me to say this, Mr. Speaker, and I think that this is the best and easiest way to explain it for the Honorable Member and people of the public. The way that this is done, as I explained in a ministerial statement during the budget session, is that by agreement from 1979, the Ministry of Finance sets the maximum retail price of gasoline. The maximum retail price of gasoline, Mr. Speaker, has not changed since February. So I'm not certain what specific increases the Honorable Member is speaking about. What I can state is, and he might be speaking from knowledge in other areas, what I can state from the Ministry of Finance's perspective, we set the maximum price for the sale of gasoline, and that maximum price has not changed since February. At February, it was $2.34 per liter. It has not changed. And so no service station is authorized to sell gasoline higher than that price. If the Honorable Member has information to me that there may be something else going on, I'm welcome for him to share that with me privately, and I'm happy to have officials of the Ministry of Finance investigate and follow with that Honorable Member.
For clarity, so we don't go back and forth. And I'm not going to get into the specific numbers. I think for clarity is that the price that's at the pump today is the same price that was at the pump in February of this year. However, if that freeze hadn't been put in place in February, there were increases that could and would have taken place from February to, what's the date, July 1st. That would have been the impact on the increase in fuel. I'm not going into what the numbers were or how much has been saved in that. That's just a simple ins and outs. I don't have the arithmetic to try and figure that out. I just want for the clarity of the listening audience and those seeking to ask for other questions. I'm not disputing what the numbers are. It's just that the freeze prevented the fuel from going up higher.
So the supplemental, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, yes, put your supplemental.
Yeah, and understanding, so I want to be clear, the $23 that the Premier speaks of, that's per tank fill up? Is that what he's saying? Or is that for the year?
Mr. Speaker, if I may?
Yes.
As I explained earlier, I was informed by retailers of cars Bermuda that the average size tank in Bermuda is 40 liters. Given the difference of price that was frozen in February to where the price would be if we did not freeze, based upon the formula that is used by the Ministry of Finance, that means for each tank, for an average size tank, there is a $23 savings. It would have been $23 more. Now, some tanks can be bigger, some tanks can be smaller. I've just used an average size tank, which was stated to me at 40 liters.
Supplemental?
Supplementary, what's your supplementary? Opposition leader?
Mr. Minister of Finance, despite the fact that you did not increase the retail price of gas since February, my question to you is this. Can you confirm that there was an incremental increase in government revenue because of the wholesale price of fuel increasing during the same period? So you did not charge us, but our consolidated fund benefited from the ad valorem tax based on the increase of the wholesale price of fuel coming to this country.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to do my best to be polite, but this is the second time that the Honorable Opposition Leader and Shadow Minister of Finance has made a statement that he purports to be factual. Last time it was with CPI, which was completely wrong, and this time the honorable member is completely wrong again.
I'm asking the question. I'm not making a statement. I'm asking.
Gasoline import taxes are not ad valorem taxes. They are taxes on each unit. This is relief that is costing the government money, and we will certainly make sure that those measures are laid when we speak about the economic relief package that this government will be presenting at the next time that the House of Assembly sits, Mr. Speaker. But it is patently false to state that the government of Bermuda, while reducing gasoline taxes to protect consumers, saving persons $23 for each time they fill up, is earning the government more money. That is patently and 100% false, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, yes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. The Honorable Premier just said that this is relief that is costing the taxpayer money. So I assume he's referring to the cost increase that the fuel companies have requested and has been denied. So in this case, as per what the Premier just said, how has the government paid or compensated the fuel companies for not allowing their increases to be passed on to the consumer?
Thank you. Just remind you, dress code. Premier?
Thank you, Mr.
Sorry,
Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I have my
Jacket.
Okay, I'll get my jacket. It's a little hot, but I'll get my jacket. Thank you.
No problem. Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to answer the question. There has been no compensation. The cost to the taxpayer is because gasoline taxes in this country are very high. Do you know why they're high, Mr. Speaker? Because the former government, under the honorable member's leadership, doubled those taxes while they were in office, Mr. Speaker. What this government has done, as we stated inside of our budget statement, we will take the variances from the budget to provide relief in the form of lower energy taxes. We've delivered on that promise, and as I stated in my response earlier, Mr. Speaker, that we will quantify how much this relief costs, quantify additional relief to make sure that we are being responsive to the concerns of the electorate, Mr. Speaker. But the government has made no payments to fuel companies.
Next question, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary. Sorry, Michael.
Okay, who's asking the sub?
I have a second question.
Okay, you do your second question, a supplementary to that question? Okay, second question.
Sorry, let me just get my video on here. Apologies. So, Mr. Speaker, my second question then is, based on what the Premier is saying, who is footing, because fuel is increasing, and we know that fuel is increasing right now with every boatload that comes in every couple of months to the Rubis or so. Who is taking the cut here? Is it government that has taken a cut, or is it corporate business that's taken the cut to maintain this price? Has government taken a deduction, or has the corporate company taken the deduction to maintain the price?
Premier?
Who's absorbing it? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Happy to provide clarity. I thought I've answered that specific question twice already, but I will try again. The ability to freeze the costs at the pump is due to the fact of the extraordinarily high gasoline taxes, which were doubled under the former administration. What we have done is that we have put in place a pricing mechanism that is reducing the taxes to make sure that the cost does not increase. There is a little bit of shared sacrifice, which may be coming from some of the fuel importers due to the variances, but the majority of this, Mr. Speaker, is being absorbed by the government in the form of a reduction in the gasoline import taxes, which is directly in line with the pledge that we made in the 2022 budget statement delivered in this honorable House. As this measure moves forward, as part of one of the bills which I expect to be tabled next week, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Home Affairs, the Deputy Premier, will bring a fuels bill, and that will move the regulation of fuel pricing from an informal structure at the Ministry of Finance to the regulatory authority, which will have the complete and full transparency and all of those particular items, just as things are done in other areas. But at this time, Mr. Speaker, it is primarily being borne by the Ministry of Finance and in the form of reduced taxes, which is saving businesses and families across this country and protecting them from the increase in gasoline prices. Record gas prices all around the world, Mr. Speaker, not here in Bermuda.
Supplementary?
Yeah, supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Understanding what the Premier has said, I mean, if we look around the world, Bermuda gas prices have been some of the highest around the world. Everyone else is just catching up to us, quite frankly. We've been at $8 for Lord knows how long. So I don't buy into his assertion, what he's just said. My question to him then is, he's saying that this is a shared sacrifice, and I'm getting confused here because I haven't heard the Premier give us or qualify us exactly the deduction in taxes that the government has put in place to reduce the price. I understand that the corporate level has taken the deduction and expect a rebate. Now, if the Premier is saying that at some point in time he's going to give them a rebate, then he should say that. But I don't believe that the government has taken a rebate over the last 3 months with the fuel price. It has been the corporate business that has done that.
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I have the benefit of sitting in the chair of Ministry of Finance, and I can say what the honorable member is saying is categorically false. But if he wishes to have a conversation with me on the specifics, as there are 14 statements, and we spent 12 minutes of the opposition seemingly attacking the government for protecting persons against the increase in gasoline prices. And with respect,
there's no attack.
We don't have to, members, just be mindful of the terminology that we use, and when people are exercising the process of Parliament, which is to scrutinize matters. And if we're allowing it to be scrutinized, it's not seen to be an offensive. It's seen to be doing what Parliament is required to do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, allow me to say this. The honorable member did say something. He did say that gasoline prices in Bermuda had been high. And do you know why? Part of that is, Mr. Speaker, is the former government doubled the taxes on gasoline, which led to an additional increase in the price of gasoline at the pump of $1.50, Mr. Speaker. So yes, prices are high. And yes, we are going to tackle them. So I'm happy to speak with the honorable member. If he has any particular questions, I'm happy for the members of the opposition to meet with technical officers in the Ministry of Finance to get the clarification of which they want, Mr. Speaker. But what is clear in this particular instance, Mr. Speaker, is that we have taken action to protect persons from the increase of gasoline prices. There are record gasoline prices around the world, not here in Bermuda, Mr. Speaker, because of the actions of this government.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, there are other members who also wish to put questions to you on this statement. Based on the first member who's asked questions and the amount of energy it's generated, I assume that the other two members, when they put their questions, are going to could similarly generate the same type of time. If that's it, I'm going to suggest that we take our traditional break at this moment. We'll come back with roughly 39 minutes on the clock at 2 o'clock, so we can finish the question period. So if you move us now, and members that just seek your indulgence now, if we could break and come back at 2 o'clock and continue the question period.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that this honorable House is now adjourned for lunch until 2 p.m.
Thank you, Premier. Any objections? There are none. Members of the House now stands adjourned until 2 p.m.